I created a little website here for some of the, this has some of the stuff that you can do with Blender. There's this Agent 327 short film, and there's others once you go to that YouTube site. So anything that's listed, like here in Sculpting Techniques, any of these you click on, they'll take you to some really fantastic information on how to do that. Some of these tutorials are some of the best. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, photogrammetry, freeform modeling using the Sculpt tool, box modeling, which we'll be covering today. But that site is screamingmonkey.net, just /Blender with a capital B, and I'll take you right to that. And here there's a bunch, every one of these is a link. And this one you might want to download immediately. It's the Blender shortcuts, which can be pretty daunting. They're color coded, so like here we have the yellow. It's when you hold down Control and hit Q, that's the familiar quit. But with the black, if you hit Alt, so that would be the bottom portion here, unhide all. If you hit H, H without holding down any other of these modifier keys would hide. So this is, you can just right click on it and copy the image, it's PNG. But go to screamingmonkey.net /B Blender, and that'll take you right to this site, which should be pretty helpful.
By the way, despite that shortcut keyboard thing, there is something called a Spacebar Autocomplete.
Yeah, within
I
Blender.
made that name up, by the way, but it is a real feature. Use the spacebar liberally is all I have to say. That is the most important shortcut to know.
Oh, also, there's a new company that's opened up, I guess, about 3 months ago called Branch VFX. And if you're interested in getting involved with nuke, match move, rotoscoping, and actually just learning this stuff and getting in at the ground floor of a new visual effects company that's opened up right here in Albany, get a hold of these guys right through, you can get a hold of them through me or probably somewhere on this website. I'm not really sure.
There's a careers page.
Let's see at the top here.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so just get a hold of them. They're looking for people actively now. They've only got 7 people. But they've done a lot of work on television and film. They do a lot of Marvel movies, Westworld, I guess. So it might be something you're interested in. Okay, so without further ado, we can get started. This is sculpting in Blender. There's so much that you can do with Blender. We're just going to stick to some sculpting. Who I am, my name is Geoffrey Smith, and I worked on a bunch of games over the past 20 years. Now some of these games took 3 years, worked on them for about 3 years, and some were only for a year to a month, but when you add them up, it's a lot of time spent making art for games. Yeah, so what is Blender? It's an open source, freely available 3D program that is actually the most used 3D software package in the world. I didn't know that until recently, but because it's free, that makes a lot of sense. You can download it right here and there's a link also on that other page that I showed you, the Screaming Monkey one, blender.org. If you just go to blender.org, you'll find it. Or if you just type in Blender, as long as Blender 3D, you'll be able to download it and install it on Mac or PC. So you can do pretty much anything with Blender. You can create games, virtual reality, augmented reality, printable 3D models, digital movies, special effects, animations, motion graphics, previs, 3D characters, environments, architecture, and just about anything. So
I forgot video editing and making games.
Oh, it's got a game engine built into it, like Unity, but I'm not sure many people use that. And it's also got a compositing program built into it.
Right. For those who actually want to know, the intended use for the game engine is actually so that animation is a lot easier. So you just have it so that part wave effects happen at a specific point in time, or if the character happens to be in a specific zone or something like that. So, but yes, you can further take that and actually make a game out of it. We've played a few. I'll save that one.
Yeah, it's not Unity. Okay, so different types of modeling that we could cover since we're centering on modeling. There's, I've seen a lot of people model with just basic primitives where they're putting together spheres and cones and cylinders and cubes to form what they want to arrive at. And then there's box modeling, which is in conjunction with subdivision surface modeling usually, but where you're just extruding and pulling faces out from a box if you're starting with a basic box. And I'll start with that. And then with subdivision surfaces, it's where that box gets tessellated using this Catmull-Rom formula. And then there's freeform modeling, which Blender added this Sculpt method, the Sculpt component, which is sort of their version of ZBrush built right into Blender. Now, no other 3D program that I'm aware of has that. I know Max tried something like it and it worked horribly, so not at all. But the one in Blender actually works very well, even though they're not using voxels. Photogrammetries, where you could take a lot of shots, photographs of an object, and you can actually, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but one way is you take all these photos from all around an object. So the front and the back and the top and the bottom and the sides, and you can get hundreds of these images together and you load them all up into a program, and the program figures out the shape from all the photographs, and then it bakes the actual texture from the photos onto the 3D model. And then you could take it out and you really have to do a lot of work on the model because it's usually pretty noisy. And but once you do all the work, these models look very photorealistic. And then there's NURBS, non-uniform rational B-splines, that are really no longer used today. When I started out doing 3D modeling in Alias Wavefront, we would only use NURBS, and you could only model with a 3D cage. So you'd never see a shaded model, you'd never see a rendered model unless you hit render and waited 15 minutes for that one frame to render. And that was on these terribly expensive Silicon graphics machines back when Alias, which is now Maya, cost $10,000 a seat. But now we got free 3D software. So I just want to ask what people are most interested in learning to use Blender for. Is it games or VR or 3D printing? Because each of these has specific considerations when you're modeling. Or special effects.
Games.
Games, yes, I figured. Character design? For games, maybe?
Yes.
Games is actually the most difficult, which is great in a way because it covers the most. And you need to learn how to make models that are really light, so not a lot of polygons. Yeah, but what makes it so difficult is you build the highest resolution mesh you can and make it look as real as possible, and then you transfer all that detail onto the low poly mesh. Yeah, whereas film and 3D printing don't really have those necessities attached to them. But anything in real time like VR, AR, or games is going to have those considerations. And I'd love to get into that stuff with you guys, too, how you do that. Because you can do it all with Blender. And so I think we'll just get started in Blender, in the interface right here. So when you first open up Blender, this is exactly what you'll see. And like most 3D programs, you open them up and there's just this array of unbelievable amounts of buttons and check boxes and pull down menus and tabs, and it can be really confusing. At least Blender throws a cube in there and you can kind of acquaint yourself with the area. How you move around within this environment is with the middle mouse. If I hold down the middle mouse, I can rotate, and if I use the middle mouse to use that wheel, I can zoom in. Now there's a thing too that can happen. You can see here this orange line around the cube means that it's selected. So let me see, if I right click over here.
Oh, I think I have those.
Oh shit. Okay. Oh, reverse? Okay. There we go.
Fun fact, selection in Blender is done with right click.
Yes.
By default, but you can change that because...
Did you change it just for Blender?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there's another thing you can do with Blender too, is when you open up the program, you go File, let me see, I can't really see, I gotta read it here. This is very small.
User preferences.
Yes, there we go. Okay, in the user preferences, you got these presets here, and if you want, you can tell it to act like 3D Max, or Blender, or Maya. So I would like to use it as Blender because it doesn't act like Max and it doesn't act like Maya. There's a few things that get changed, but for the most part, I like to stick with what the program ships with and not have to change that, especially if you're teaching. All right, so this is very important too. We get down here for dollying and zoom style. John must have went in and inverted over here. But sometimes if you're not, okay, so if I middle mouse click here, it looks like it's rotating around the center here.
Oh yeah, no, you change that to default.
Now if I hold down shift, I can move. With the middle mouse and shift, this is how you kind of scan back and forth and up and down. Let's say I select this light here. Now I'm rotating around that light. You can see the difference. So I'll select the cube, which would be right click. Oh, and now I'm not rotating around that cube. So I gotta fix this. Because what I want is to rotate around the thing that's selected, which can come in really handy if you've got a 8 million vertice object and you select one vertice and it's rotating somewhere, in XYZ space that you completely lose the model in. So, or
It says stuff to default, that's fine. I'll just change it back.
it is okay?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
And you can just save the user settings on the phone on that one.
Let me see where, oh, here we go. It's on this one. The interface, the very first one. Global scene, prompt click, smooth view. Zoom to mouse position, that's very useful. So always keep that one. And all that is if my mouse is over here, it's going to zoom into that area. If my mouse is over here, it's going to zoom into where the cube is. See? So you're just picking where you want to zoom. And rotate around selection. That's very, very important. And then you hit save these user settings. And you can set it so now next time I open this up, that's what the settings will be. All right, so let's say we want to move this cube around. Again, oh, it didn't switch it. Oh, yes, it did. Okay, so right-clicking now is actually working. But if I want to move this cube, we've got this gizmo here with red is X and green is Y. You can see them down here too, and Z or Z is up and down. And if I just grab the blue one for Z, you can see the line, and it'll only allow me to move it up and down. If I, however, want to grab it and move it any which way I want within a 2D view, I can grab that circle, as you can see right there. and I can move that around any way I want. And then with the red, now this red line here going into infinity, that's unique to Blender. You won't see that in other programs. So like when you grab onto that handle and it will draw that line into infinity. And I kind of like it. It's different than any other program. So here we got our cube, and if you look at this grid here, I'm gonna hold down Shift and move. So basically, to get your view, middle mouse, rotate, and you're rotating around the thing selected. So I want to rotate around this light over here. I click on it, now I'm rotating around that. Rotate around the cube by right-clicking, and zoom, middle mouse in and out. Hold down Shift, middle mouse to move things around. All right, so you can see these lines here. They're going into infinity. This is a perspective view. And you can tell that by looking up over here, it says use your perspective. Now, if you want to change that, you don't have a number pad on this keyboard. But if you had a number pad, you can hit 0, and that'll switch that toggle from perspective to ortho, and you can do it here, or number pad 5, sorry. So here, now I'm in what they call an orthographic view. You can see here it switches. So any of the view changes you want to change, you can do them through here. So left view, you can see up here it'll tell me left ortho view. And if I wanted to switch that left view into a perspective, I would just hit 5 on the number pad, or go into here and switch it. So now you can see the difference between the two. The orthographic view can be very useful in modeling. It's not realistic, so you should always switch back to a perspective view when you're kind of finalizing your model and the final look that you want to achieve. But when it comes to working on the thing, usually an orthographic view is much easier to work in. Okay, are there any questions so far? Okay, and here I'm just going to switch to a front view, and well, I'll switch to a top view first because this is a little weird with Blender. I'm in a perspective view though, so I'm going to switch to a ortho view, and a top view I think is number 7 on the keyboard. Yeah, on the number pad. So number 7 is top view. Number 1's a front view. I think number 2's a right view. And that middle one, 5, is how you switch in between ortho and perspective. The Blender's all about keyboard commands. But you can see how this is laid out. All right. This would be the front, and this is a camera over here. So you got a camera off to the side, and you got this light off to the side. Now, if I switch to a front view, and we'll switch to that perspective of the front view, and I do a quick render, you can go up here and say render. You can see that this is totally black. I'm going to hit, to get out of this screen too, after you do a render, hit escape, and it'll take you out of it. You can hit F12 to render, and hit escape to take you out. And if you want to see a camera view, you hit 0 on your keyboard. So let me go to view from a camera perspective, and that's this little camera we got over here. It's going to be looking through that camera. And by default, for some reason, Blender puts this camera off to the side, and it puts one light off to that same side. Whereas this is the front. That face right there is the front of our object. So what I usually will do is I'll change the camera, I'll put it in the front. Let's see, we'll go to a top view here, and I can rotate this by hitting R on the keyboard. It'll allow me to rotate it. Or, that's a nice feature too, if I use something like R, hit R and rotate, but I don't want it to commit to wherever I would left click. If I right click, it'll snap it back. And that's true with everything in Blender. So if you start moving or scaling something or stretching an object out and you decide, no, I don't want to do that at all, if you right click, it'll snap right back to where it was before without hitting undo. An easier way though to move the camera around to get in your view. So I'm looking at, this is the camera view right here, and what is inside of these orange lines is the only thing that would render. And it bugged me that this is very small. So if you just middle mouse scroll, you can tell it, well, I want this much to be my view. And if you open up, there's a little plus sign over here. If you can see that, I'm not sure you can see it on the video, but there's a plus sign here. And if you open that up, it gives you a bunch of options. One is lock camera to view. So if I set that and I hold down shift and I middle mouse move I can move my object right, I'm actually moving the camera. And I can set that camera up exactly where I want it. And I can right click on this object and I'm rotating the camera around that object now. I can move the camera or the object down to the ground plane there. So shift, middle mouse, and I can see that it's intersecting with the ground plane. Whereas if I don't have that lock camera to view on and I middle mouse and move, it's just going to zap me right out of that camera view. So usually I'll set it up with the camera in the front and a light here on the side and another light over here, because if I were to render right now, and that's the front where this is, looks like it's lit up, and if I render it, we're going to get something. Yeah, I'll go into here. Now right now, what this is solid rendering. It's not really paying attention to that light, as you'll see once I switch over to material, and that's how this would render. So this is the front of the cube right here, and that light is just illuminating the one side. And as you can see, if I grab onto this green gizmo, I can move that light to the front. Okay, now at least the front is lit a little bit. And let's add another light. You've got these tabs over here. The top one that's selected right now is Tools. Right below that's Create. And this is where you'll get all of your basic primitives, your curve tools, which are splines, and your lights, or in text too, which are also splines. But let's grab a point light right now. And how this works, I'm just going to undo that. Wherever I left click, you can see this little gizmo here, is where the object will be created. So if I wanted a light right there, I can go point light, and as you can see, it went over there. So that's something to be aware of. It's annoying to me. No other programs really do that. But it's just something to be aware of. So if you were over here and you clicked this, and you were working in this area, and you said, I want to put another light in, and you hit point light, and you're going, where did my light go? You would find it way over here. So just be aware of that little clicking. Left clicking will leave this marker, and there's a lot you can do with that left click marker that I'm not going to get into in this one. But for this, I just want to have a light over here. Let's see. Let me go to my top view to realign myself. So top view, got a light over here, and we got a light over here. So, and our camera right here, which is kind of in the front off a little bit. And what you can do once you get this set up the way you want, is let's say I want every scene that I make. Oh, I got 3 lights. Let me get rid of that one. Delete. Let's say every scene that I make, I want to be just like this. For that to happen, I can go to File and Save Startup File. And so every time I open up Blender, considering that this is the way I want Blender to always open, I can save it as Startup File. And if I close down Blender right now, this is how it would open back up with this exact configuration. All right, so generally before you start modeling anything, you get into some concept art of some sort. And let's see what we have in this one. All right, so here's some simple concept art from this movie called Avatar. Here's some from, yeah, it's kind of obscure. But here's Batman. I think this is also from Batman. And there's a wide variety of concept art. So like this from Batman is some basic wristbands or some kind of trap or something. So that's a very specific little gizmo that's going to be within the game. And it has a lot of call outs for what it might be. And then there's these kind of larger concepts that have more of a mood to them. There's not a whole lot that you can see, like what's going on over here? What is this thing? And what's going on in this corner and that? It's not laid out like an architectural drawing, but it's more for mood, and you can really get a feel of what they're looking for. And this one's a little bit closer. Like I can see, this is a bunch of boxes basically. This would be really easy to make. The only thing that would be difficult is if you're doing normal maps and wanted shaders and the actual shader work that goes on for all of these, because you could sculpt all these, but generally even those you make one little dial and you're gonna replace it here and here, and you create some cables out of splines, and splines are just like Bezier curves that you lay out, and then within Blender you could tell them to have a certain thickness, and they're textured as you're creating them, and you create a nice little texture for them, and these things take minutes to build. So something like this would be really simple. And then with a character, they have the arms out like this so that they're easily skinned, so you can create a skeleton system, and it's not going to, when it comes time to skin it, you tell the bones to attach to all the fingers, to the forearm, to the bicep area, and then to the shoulders. What can happen if the arms are laying down by the sides is when you go to select those vertices to attach to the bone, you also grab some vertices from the leg, and when he pulls his arm away from the leg, he also pulls some of the skin from the leg out to where his hand is, and you got to fix it. So that's why you see these guys in these T poses. This is another mood shot from Batman. And then set pieces, specific things that will be handed off to an artist to build. And hopefully they're really inspiring like this one. And then a lot of this type of stuff too. A box and a show in the front and the back of it. And you just, to make it look cool. Great. Now these types of textures that would be added, this would be a basic box, but these would be emissive maps. You might have normal maps that create these little lines and details in it. And then they have these large ones, which are more like an architectural drawing for how they want the city to be laid out. Another set piece. So, yeah, here's more from Avatar. A lot of these were kind of fully realized sculptures. There's a few things that I really like that they did with Avatar. You can see how they've got them color-coded here. And I'm not sure if you can read it, but it's a medium tone metal, subtle blue paint, dark Velcro. So where those pieces are color-coded in here, you line them up. These are call-outs for the actual shaders that they want to use. And they made these really nice pieces too for the shaders. So I'm not sure you can see that. How do you zoom in here?
It's like control and scroll in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So here you can see, like for painted metal, and then they give, for each of the call-outs that were color-coded, then they give examples in these pictures. So these are the types of plastic, and this is for how light's reacting on those surfaces. And this painted metal. So it really gives a good idea of what they're looking for. So that's concept art. Let me hit escape and get out of this, I guess. Okay. All right, back to our cube. So you'd want to theoretically start out with an idea, some type of concept art. But for this one, does anybody have a request of something to make? Okay, I'll do something like a head. Did you have something? No, okay. All right, and so right now, as you can see from down here, we're in object mode. And Blender offers up these different types of modes, texture, paint. And in this mode, we could actually paint on the surface, which works pretty well. It's a great tool for, let's say you've got something textured already, and you've probably seen it in games where there's a seam, where it looks like two textures are connecting, but you'll see it's a flaw. And it's generally where one side of a texture meets another, where they're wrapping around. You'll see a seam, and with the texture tool, you can go in and actually just paint those out without having to go back and fix the unwraps. Weighted paint, that's more for animation. Vertex paint, not many people use that too often anymore, but there was one game that we were building where we were using radiosity lighting, so these very advanced lighting systems within the game, and then it would bake the darks and the lights from that system into the vertices. And it's constrained to how many vertices you have. So if you've got 1,000,000 vertices, you can have a very elaborate shadow and very accurate lighting. But if you only got a few vertices, it's not going to do too much. But the strength is you can choose where you want those vertices and control where the detail is, where you wanted the shadows, and then you could go back and actually paint too on top of the models. And it's a super cheap thing. It's so much cheaper than just textures, color maps. In Sculpt mode, I would love to get into this one. This is the mode where Blender acts like ZBrush. So you've got a whole array of tools. Any of these you select. So let's say we selected Sculpt mode. You go up to here, now you're in ZBrush. And they've got their different tools for grabbing and moving, and this is the one that we know from ZBrush where if I were to paint on this and there were 1,000,000 verts, you'd see that would form a bump and it would swell. But we're not doing that. We're doing box modeling right now, so I'm just going to go from object mode that we're in right now to edit mode. Okay, so now when you're in edit mode, you'll notice down here we have vertices. Let me see if it does a call out. Yeah, vertex, edges, and faces. So I'll switch over to faces. Right now all the faces are selected. And this is a very useful key to remember is A. If you hit A, it'll select all. And if you hit it again, it'll deselect all. So let's say I just select one face right here. Why am I not selecting a face? Uh-oh, John. Let me see what happened.
The light's not working?
No, it's very weird. Huh. It didn't come in. Let me see if I can select the edge. Usually it's with, if you right click, I would select one face. And neither one is working.
I'm trying to see. This is.
I know, I've never ran into that before.
Yeah, it's like not selecting.
It's almost like something's frozen. You want to expand that cube?
Oh, it's a touch.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. So that's object mode. Edit mode.
I'm going to try something.
And
Alright, so I'm going to get out of edit mode. You can hit tab to get in and out of edit mode. So if I hit tab from edit mode, it'll take me into object mode and vice versa. What I'm going to do is grab this sucker in object mode, and I'm going to hit Control D, and duplicate it, or just D. Alt D. Yes, there we go. Okay. So let me see if the same thing's happening with this. Yeah, very strange. I'm going to create a new primitive. So let's just get a new cube in here. Oh, not in edit mode. Shoot, I know.
Maybe just restart the
I might have to.
I have no idea what happened.
So let me try Alt deselect, and I'm just going to create a new cube here. Yeah, very odd. Let me try restarting it. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, deselect all, hit tab.
There we go.
Yes. Okay, well, if all else fails, restart. So let's get back over here into face mode. So here I'm just selecting one face. And I can delete that face. I'm just going to hit delete on the keyboard. And it asks me, do you want to delete vertices? Do you want to delete edges? Do you want to delete faces? If I were to delete vertices, which are, that's a vertice, that's a vertice, that's a vertice, and that's a vertice. If I tell it, yeah, I want to delete vertices, it's going to remove everything just about. So let's undo that. And I'm going to delete faces. Alright, so that's what we wanted. Something, especially if you're modeling for games, to get in the habit of is when you've got an object like this, and you know you just want to have the outside of this to be seen. So like if this is box modeling and I was going to create a head out of this, and I know I don't want to see the inside of the head on the character, to save rendering, I can go in and tell this, it's again in this little tab over here on the side. If you go down underneath shading, there's something called backface culling. And if I click that, you'll notice now that's not rendering that interior anymore. And it's just good to get in the habit of doing that. Let's see now. Alright, so this is going to be, how I'm going to work is, I'm going to make a head, and what I want to do is just make half the head to save some time. And then I can duplicate that work, because our faces are generally symmetrical. And if I know it's going to be an asymmetrical head, maybe there's a third eye on the other side of the head, or a horn, or something, and maybe it's just a face that is asymmetrical, as most of our faces are, I can do that at the end. So once most of the work is done on the face, and they're duplicated, then I can merge it all together as one, and I can make those slight changes to the right and the left to give it its uniqueness. So I'm going to hit tab here again, and I want to move this baby. I right click and just slide it over. I'm going to slide it to this green point. Make sure that I am facing the right way here. I'm going to go back to the top view. Generally, when I got the number pad, I'll switch back and forth quite a bit from top view just to reorient myself. So this is the top view and its perspective. So okay, so top view, this is the right hand side and that's the left hand side over there. So what I've got here is the right hand side of this cube, which is going to be the face. So I know I want it to be a little narrower. Over here I'm going to go and hit tab and go back to face mode. right click on that face and just move it over a little bit. And I hit tab again. I'm going to move this up, because if this was a head, it would be up a little bit higher. I might raise this light up too. Whoop. Okay. And then I think it might be a good idea to subdivide this a bit, because I don't want to start just with a square. I want to start with something that's a slightly rounder, but that's going to require more faces because we only have a few here. Let's see, so I'll select this, and within Blender you've got this little wrench over here for tools, and in these tools we've got deform. Let's start from the left here. Modify, generate, deform, and simulate. There's only a few that I use out of here, and when it comes to modeling I generally use subdivision surfaces, something called multi-resolution, Boolean sometimes, and arrays. Yeah. So in this case I'm going to use subdivision surface. So I click on that once and it opens up this panel, and you can see what happened to our cube. It is now something like a sphere. And here I've got two options, view and render, and those are my subdivisions. So I turn that back down to 0. We're right back where we started. And render is doing twice as many. So if I hit F12 and render this, oops, I'm not in the view, so let me go look through my camera again. Okay, and I hold down shift and middle mouse. Whoops. Oh, that's right, because we restarted. So I gotta go back over here and set this camera up. Where is it? Occlusion background. Oh, here we are. Lock camera to view. Alright, so bring that baby back down there. Okay, and if I were to hit F12 to do a render, you can see it's double the number of faces. And just hit escape to get out of that. And I'm going to go back to a front view. Middle mouse here. And we're in front orthographic. So that's only for rendering. And you'll see too, with every object that you create, it'll list it over here. And you have this eyeball, which I can turn on and off. And if I've got that turned off and I hit F12, you'll still see the cube. So hit escape to get rid of that. But if I hit this camera and hit F12, then it won't render. And that's true with all these, the lights, everything. If you want to get rid of the camera and the lights in your view here, you can go and say only show render. Whoop, that would be that one. All object origins, or let me see here. Should be under only render. Interesting. Oh, it's because this is turned off still. There we go. Okay, yeah, so if you don't want to see the camera and the lights, and you just want to concentrate on what you're modeling, you can hit only render over here. See? And then just remember to turn that back on for when you're actually want to move the cameras or the lights. All right, so we've got a rough head here, if you can call it that. I'm going to get a little light down at the bottom, or you can switch over from this material mode to solid mode, which kind of lights your model up a bit from all sides. And you can see there's these faces are all very apparent. It's called faceted, and for a head you can tell right off the bat that that's not going to work too well. So I want to smooth all those faces out, and how you do that is go into edit mode. So you can hit tab or go object edit, And you can see here, this is this subdivision surface that's been applied, or that's on top of our model. So if I were to increase this, you can see the subdivision's increasing. I bring that down to where we were, and I'm going to actually commit to this. So I'll hit apply up here. Oh, I got to be out of edit mode. There we go. So I just hit tab to get out of edit mode. Now I'm going to hit apply, and you'll see I have no modifiers now under that tool. It's just this faceted circle. So let's select that circle again, hit tab, and I'm going to hit A to select all the faces. So A to deselect them all, A to select them all. And over here, under create, there's shading and UVs. And if you hit shading and UVs, you'll see right at the top, faces, smooth. And I'll hit tab. Now you can see they smoothed all those faces out, which is much easier to work with when it comes to trying to make a likeness of a face. All right, I'm going to go back into edit mode by hitting tab again. Hit A to deselect all. And I'm going to pull down, I think, this face here. No, maybe this one. No, this one. So I'm going to grab this, and this is going to be my character's neck. So if I grab this circle, I can move it where I want to, rather than using the arrows to just constrain to X, Y, or Z. And if I hit R, I can rotate this a bit. If I want to constrain my rotations to, let's say, this blue one, which is the Z. So if I hit R and then I hit Z, it's going to rotate around that line right there, the Z. So you can get a feel for these things. Now again, if I right click, it'll zap it back to where it was. Let's say I wanted to rotate R around the Y. You can see that, which again is not what I want to do, and right click to zap it back. What I want to do is rotate around the X, and there we go. And then I just hit G and I can move that over here. So let me see, G is one to remember. G, R for rotate, S, if I hit S here, that's scale. And again with the X, Y, and Z, I'm just going to hide this grid for a minute. Let me turn that off. Here we go. Yeah, just hide the grid. Again with scale, if I hit S, it's going to uniformly scale the whole thing. If I hit SX, it's going to only scale it along that X plane. No matter what I do, it'll only scale where that red line is. And same thing with X or S scale and Y. So if I go up and down, it's not going to scale that way. It's only going to scale in this direction. All right. And now let's say I wanted to pull this out. I want to make more geometry. I can hit E, and that's an extrude. So you can see what happened there. It also creates this face, which you got to delete. Let's get rid of that face. Okay. And let's say I wanted to create another face right here. Again, I can go extrude. Oops. I think I zapped it back. Yeah. But it'll create another one right there. I can scale that down. Whoops. Like so, delete that face. Or I could keep it, but I'm going to delete that face. And scoot this one over to the side. Something that's good to do at this point, if you know you're going to be doing something that's symmetrical, I'm going to hit A to deselect all. And I'm going to hit tab to go back to object mode. Let's get a top-down view. So go to view or hit 7, I think, on your number pad. So let's get this top-down view again. And you can see I'm right on this green line, which is the Y. I'm just going to slide that over a little bit more. And we're going to apply another modifier to this. Under the tools, we're going to do a mirror modifier. Now, that's a bummer. It mirrored it, but it mirrored it over on the opposite side. So what you can do is, go to your mirror modifier, and it allows you to do what axis. I know I want it on the x-axis, not the y-axis, not the z-axis. You could have it do either in all of these different ones. As you can see here, it's upside down. But I want it on the x-axis, and I am going to scoot it over, so let me hit let me see here. It's not the merge limit. Hang on a minute.
Does it have to do where the origin is?
Yes, it is. But usually you can move the plane. Let me see if I go A. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, because this side over here is actually virtual. It's not really there. I can't manipulate it. But in edit mode, as we are right now, if I select just this face, you'll see it's going to do it over there too. If I select this face, it's going to do it on both sides. But if I hit tab and I want to go over to this side and I want to work on that side, I can't. It won't allow me to select any faces. There are no faces there. It's just like a mirror image. And so I can grab these verts over here, hit A to deselect them all. There's a couple of cool different ways of grabbing parts of meshes. One is you can hold down Control and left click, and that'll give you this lasso tool. And you can see it only selected these front ones. These ones in the back, it didn't allow me to select because, I'll hit A again to deselect all. This little guy right here, which is limit selection to visible. So if I turn that on, now you can see behind the model. It's a little bit grayed out. And if I hold down Control and left click again with my lasso and grab those vertices and slide that over, and you can see it grabbed all of them. But you may not always want that to be on. Okay, and you can see here, this is a quad, but I can tell every quad is actually, the only thing it understands are triangles. So this is made up of two triangles. You just can't see that it's two triangles, but you can see here when I'm rotating it that there's this crease right in the middle, which means there are two triangles there. If I were to further subdivide this, like say if I added another subdivision surface, you wouldn't see that anymore. It's smoothing it out. And let's say this is a low enough poly mesh that I could actually commit to this. So I'm going to apply that too. And I'm going to show you a nice quick tool. Down here, we're in object mode right now, but let's say we go into sculpt mode. Now, I'm only using a mouse. This is yeah, but this is very useful if you've got a tablet because it'll also be pressure sensitive. I'm going to use this grab tool right now, and how this works is I've got this green mesh, or this green cursor, which is like a paintbrush, and I can scale that up and down by using the brackets, just like in Photoshop. So if I use a really big one like this and I grab this side, you'll see I can start to manipulate this mesh. And I'll make it a little smaller. I'll pull this in. And since I have this mirror modifier on, it's doing the same thing on both sides. If you hold down, I think it's Control. Nope. I think it's either Shift. Yeah. Just like in ZBrush. If you hold down Shift, it's going to smooth out that surface. So with a mesh this low, if I go Shift, it's going to smooth that completely out, which is generally not what you want. But for making kind of large changes to your mesh, you can use this Sculpt tool, and it can get you in the ballpark. Like rounding this out is a lot easier than grabbing the verts and scaling them where I was before. So it's kind of like a soft selection tool. It's grabbing these faces, but it's allowing me to be a little bit more like a sculptor rather than someone who's just working on a mesh. Okay, I wouldn't go too far with that, but I'm going to get out of sculpt mode and go back to edit mode here. Hit A to deselect all. I'm going to commit to this one. I'm going to hit apply. Oh, that's that. Got to be out of edit mode. So tab to get out and back into object mode. I'm going to apply that. All right. Ooh. I'll go back a bit here. Because I can tell by looking at this that these verts are not welded, which is strange. I'm going to go back to where our mirror modifier was. Yeah, this is interesting too. So what we're using right now with this subdivision, oh yeah, here it is. So with this subdivision, we're using Catmull-Clark. And what that does is it averages. So if I turn that off, we just have this boxy form. If I turn on Catmull-Clark, it smooths everything out. So what it's doing is it's averaging the vertices in between one another when it subdivides the mesh. So here, when you can see this mesh, let me subdivide it. Looks like I got one over another here. Yeah, you could see this, how it smooths from that subdivision. I'll turn it down one more time. And here, what I was talking about with the seam in the middle, I want to have merge on. This is our x-axis. Hit A to deselect all. I want these vertices to merge. If I turn this down to nothing, I'm not seeing it. Let's see what's going on here. All right, I'm going to grab this and pull it apart a bit. Okay. So let's say I had it here. If I hit merge, right now those are not merging, those vertices on that mirror, because the merge limit's set to 0. And if I start to turn that up, now you can see right about where that threshold is in distance. And if I were to commit to this mirror with it separated like this, I'd have to go back and weld all the vertices along that edge. So I'm going to apply this one. I can't do it in that mode. I'm going to apply this one, and I am going to get those to weld. Let's apply this one. Whoop, there we go. Okay. Hit A to deselect all. Wait a second, didn't look at what went. Okay, apply. Oh, got to be in object mode, so apply. All right, so now I can go back into sculpt mode. And if I were to grab the move tool here, so we get a little larger by hitting the brackets. You can see it's doing it on both sides, even though we don't have a mirror modifier. What's happening is we've got this symmetry portion down here, and it has its own mirror modifier, X. So if I turn that off, I'm going to get a bigger one here, you'll see I'm just working on the one side. So I turn that off. I'm going to keep, whoops, I don't want radial. I want X. Here we go. Okay, so now it's going to do it on both sides for me. Whenever you're working within this sculpt mode, though, if you want to work in a higher resolution, don't use subdivide surfaces. They made something special for sculpt mode, and that is called multi-resolution. And it works fairly much the same as the subdivision surface, but if you try to go ahead using subdivision surfaces while you're in sculpt mode, you'll start to run into problems pretty quickly. So here I'm going to punch this up a bit. Let's see here. Why is it not letting me? There we go. Oh no. Okay, that's it. So there, it's giving me a much smoother surface here. And now I can start to really do large changes to this model. And it's going to be on both sides. So again, this is going to be a face. Let's do it quickly. I can hold down the shift tool, smooth that out a bit. Lift this up, pull out a chin. Out here. And I get a larger brush. It's looking like an alien head. Shift, middle mouse. Let's pull that neck down. Now let's get a smaller brush here. Underneath the neck. Get that chin stronger again. And we got this kind of cube looking thing, which is something that can be helped if you're rotating around the model a lot. You can go in and start to fix it. And this neck is a little thick. Pull that up, out. Let's get in here a bit. And then again with these, now that's only the move tool. With this, and this is fantastic when you've got a tablet because it's pressure sensitive. And you can set it so that the scale or the size of the brush will be larger with how hard you press too. Right now if I press down, it's going to pop it out. If I hold down Control, it'll push it in. And that's the same how ZBrush works. So I can start to form these eye holes. Start to form a place where the mouth will be. I can hold down Shift and smooth out areas. I can subdivide some more. Oh, subdivide this button over here. And you'll see those numbers have changed. And I can go in and hold down Shift, smooth that out a bit, smooth this little portion out. Switch back over to, each of these has a keyboard command too associated. When this grab one is F, so if I were to hit F on the keyboard, I can switch back to that. Because what I find I'll do mostly this grab and this sculpt, and flatten sometimes. There's a inflate one in here. Never really used the snake hook. Yeah, inflate right there. And if you want to get into doing details, so let's say we kick this up some more. Oh, subdivide. And I wanted to do some details, so I get a smaller brush like this. I can start kind of etching this out. I know if I use this, it's going to, whoops, that's still the move tool, so the sculpt tool. If I draw like this, it's going to add geometry, right? And if I hold down control, it's going to subtract. So I can start to add things here, and just by using the control, I can subtract. I'm going to do that, or add here. This is looking pretty awful, but I'm going to go in and do some large movements here, because when you add those details, it kind of can help you to get your bearings a bit on what's happening. So I got this very bulbous head, and I hold down Shift and smooth all that out. Smooth some of that out. I want that to go down. And get a smaller brush for this. Let's get from the top here. And look from the bottom. And you can start making these very large changes. I know those cheeks are way too bumpy, so I'm going to just go in and smooth them with a smaller brush. Hold down Shift. Smooth out that area a bit. And I got these big bumps over here. I'm still using the move brush. So I don't know if this is a male or a female yet at this point. Again, like concept art can be very helpful and know what the hell you're doing. Oh, sorry. Let me see. I'm smooth that side out. Yeah, and then at this point it would be real good to just go in and start painting in details. I keep on wanting to go to the tablet with this. But for pressure control too, so like say if I'm pressing here and it's like, oh man, it's way too heavy. You can go in and just tell it under strength. Let's turn that down. You can have very subtle changes, especially if you're using a mouse. It's absolutely necessary. Yeah. Whoops. And what's amazing though about having a this kind of sculpt mode is if I go back down into, yikes, if I go back down into a lower level like this, it will remember up higher ones. So I can make some changes here. Like say I was going to start to do an ear. So switch this, and I need to turn that strength back up. And I'll start creating an ear over here. Some nostrils. Go up in here. A little bit. I got this weird bump in there. Okay, so if I, oh, F, there we go. Okay, whoops, F. Oh, it didn't switch the brush to that one. Alright. There's not a lot of mesh right there, so I smooth it out. These are set back a little bit too far, but just for an example, if I switch down to these lower levels, it's still keeping that a little bit. So I could commit to this pretty low poly mesh, and if I hit apply right now, it just leave me with this. Wait, I gotta be out of this mode. I want to delete higher. Okay, and then I can go into object mode, and now I can apply this. And so we got further using those sculpt tools than we would have just moving these vertices around, or generally planes. And as you can see, we got a nice, like for animation, this is actually really good. I could go in here again and cut it in half. So let's say I want to do that. I want to do a mirror modifier again. Go into view, let's go to the front, make sure we're in orthographic view. And there's another selection tool here. I'll hit A to deselect all and hit B. I always think of this as the box selection tool. And I want to make sure that we're going to select both the front and the back, so let's hold that. I'll hit B, and we got this. And I can go right down here and select those. Oh, great. Let me hit A. I'll hit B again. Some programs you can do it with the half, and here I can switch that, but with this, if I want to select all those faces, I have to have them all within the frame there. And now you can see if I scroll around to the back, we got a nice selection. Let me make it a little easier to see by turning that off. And what I can do is hit delete. Remember to delete the faces, not the vertices or the edges. Just delete those faces. And I can apply another mirror modifier on this. Right here. And now we're back to where we were before with editing just on one side. And this is real handy because I know, like, I want to create a hole for the eyeballs, which might be right about here. Yeah. And I can hit E to extrude, but I'm going to extrude them back into there. And I could do that for the mouth area. Generally with this mouth area, I don't want it to be in a smile like this. I want to start to shape lips out of that space. So I'm going to go into hit A, deselect all, and go into sculpt mode again to grab some of that mesh. Oh, okay. Smooth that out. Okay. So it's basically a back and forth push and pull process. Let me see. I've got one in here that's a little bit further along. Whoop. Yeah, so let's say, let me go up one more here. So what's so nice about Blender too, you can just double click on a model and have it open up fairly quick. Now here's one of those meshes that was created in that same way, but you can see here with materials, I'm going to go into, which we haven't talked about yet, but that modeling process that I was doing is how this was arrived at. And so was, let me see here. So here's our materials, and I've got some already created. I select this jacket, let's say. Ooh, it's not showing up. So world one, I'm gonna get rid of that. Oh, we're on Blender render, okay. That's another thing. Up here you have Blender render, and you've got Blender game and Cycles render. I generally only use these two, Blender render and Cycles. If you take a look at Cycles, it's this top one called rendered, and since I'm in Cycles and I hit render in this one, this is their real-time kind of global illumination renderer, and it responds, I mean, fairly quickly, even on this laptop. Let me go into a top view. Look at that light over here a bit. Oh, I can't see the light, that's right. We got to go back to, this material view. Get this light right here and move that out in front. I think in the newer version you can move you can see lights and move them around when you're in this render view right here. Just takes a little bit. Yeah, so in 7 or 2.79 I would be able to move the light around. It's still selected. I may be able to move it. No. I could just move him. But anyways, I'm going to go into this material view. It's a pretty strong light. I'm going to select this guy. And here's your light control. And this is a point light. You can switch them right on the fly here too. An area light. Got a little larger. Now with an area light, it's how these work is it's emitting light from this surface. So here's the surface, right? I'm going to rotate that a little bit. Just hit R. I can point it towards them. And it's spread down kind of low. But now if I go and render this, I'll go into that render view. You'll get a softer shadow because the light's coming from a large area. Yeah, let me crank that up a bit too. Oh, yeah. I'll switch it to nodes. And I can crank up the strength here. That's better. And it's actually rotating around the light since that's what's selected, but I can't manipulate the light in this version. So let's go into materials here again, and select this guy's jacket, and we'll get the material here for his jacket. Let's see if it's, yeah, low pockets might be this one here. I can test that out by going into these properties. Let's see what we got on there. A lot of hair. Let's go, the head's actually labeled, so I'll go in here and we can check out the materials that might be on the head. Now these are already made. Oh, I'm going to get out of cycles too. Because generally if you're constructing something for games, you don't want to use this cycles render. It's not like a games renderer where light is bouncing around and it calculates bounces of light. You want to use the Blender render, which will give you a much more realistic view. That's very dark. So where's this light? Oh, okay. I'm gonna switch this back to just a point light. Yeah, and everything. The thing is, the materials are different for cycles and Blender render. Since we're in Blender render right now, we're not going to use nodes. We're going to use texture maps that are hooked up to these guys here. He doesn't have a shader on his hair, that's why it's this awesome fuchsia. There is a normal map on here though, on the pockets at least. And I don't think there's one for the, and there's definitely one on the head because you can see these little wrinkles in it. So I'm going to go and see what's happening here. And how this works with Blender and materials, you have the shader, which is this ball right here, and attached to that shader we have textures. So this is the jacket. Oh boy. You see when I switch to this one. Just that pretty slow with all these hairs. I'll get these out of here. There's more. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to hide some of these hairs. Get another light over here just so you can see what we're doing. That would be Alt D. Let's put another one on here. Alright, and here's the textures. And here's a color map we've got attached. And you can see there's just color data. That's for his face. And you could show it, have it show both the material and the color map. And if we go down into here, you can see it's just attached to color. If I turn that off, it'll disappear. But we can see the normal map on there still. So I'm going to switch over to take a look at the normal map and see how it's set up. Because this was done in Max, and it looks like where these wrinkles would be on the forehead are popping out rather than being indented. So I want to go into the normal map and see how that's set up. And in Blender with the normal map, you always got to tell it it's a normal map right here, which it doesn't do by default, and set it to tangent space normal. And I think I'm going to have to invert it. So let's go to this normal map. Doesn't give me the option within here. A lot of, let me see here. Sometimes within the actual program you can invert it. I can do it here if I pull this down into negative territory. As you can see here, those now are indented rather than where the creases before were sticking out, it looked like. If I push this back up, you'll see they're sticking out now. And so how this was created was I created a high poly mesh that had these details in it, these little wrinkles and stuff. And they were baked into this purpley looking map, which is called the normal map, and just has those details in it. And for each part of this model, I'm going to go into this jacket here. For each part of this model, there's normal maps. I just got to get them set up correctly. You can see they're really shiny. They don't have a spec map, so I'm okay with this head being that shiny, but with this jacket, it looks like it's made out of plastic. And usually what you would do is create a specular map, which I may have for this. But it's very odd how these are set up in Blender. Yeah, there's the jacket, but that's pockets. So these are the lower pockets. That was named. Let me see what else we have. Not sure what that one is. That is some type of glass, which looks like it might be a covering for the eye. And there's the eye, buttons, head. This default may be the jacket. Let me try that. So how this works is you've got your material. Since there's a color material on there, okay, so that tells me right away that's the pockets. If I go over here, you can see that's the color map that's being applied there, but it's also, and it's funny how you do this. So you go down, you scroll down, and it's using the color. I'm going to also use the diffuse for that. And go back up to this texture. Strange that this diffuse is being utilized. This is a lot like in Unity, where you've got your additional, what do they call it? Penumbra, is it? Are you familiar with that? Where you got your color map and then you've also got your albedo. Yeah. But with this guy, I'm going to turn that off. Strange so that it shouldn't be receiving any of the extra color from that shader. It's a little bit. There's another one here. See, now I exported, this was a Max model, and I exported it as an FBX, so I haven't gone back and reattached all of these materials. So I'd have to go through each of them. Now here's the normal map for that pocket. Again, if I go into here, you can see it's the normal, but I got to push it in to get those wrinkles to look right. And the bigger jacket, but how you, like say if I wanted to just create a jacket from scratch, I would say, let's create a brand new material in here, Blender, because I cannot find this jacket. I can go, I'm in this material mode right here, this little ball. I can hit plus. I got a new material and say new, and here it is. I'm going to call this one jacket. Okay, but as we can see, it's not gray. It's still the old one. So what you do is you go into edit mode, hit tab. I've got this jacket selected. This is kind of cool. I'll hit A. to deselect everything. Since this is one big object, I don't want to apply it to the pockets and everything. But if I hit L, is it L? Yeah. Hit L, it'll just select what's connected, even though this is all one object. So if I'm floating over this pocket and I hit L, it's just going to select those faces. So let me hit A to deselect all. So I'll float over this. I think those buttons are part of it too. So L, no, just this pocket though. I can hit L over on this pocket, I'll select that too, because those are also connected. Yeah, and the buttons actually are. So I'm hitting L just to, and you could isolate things that way. Whereas it would be very difficult to go in here and select them by faces. All right, so I know I just want this jacket. Hit L, and I can go back over to this material, and I'm going to tell it to apply just this material. And let's assign that. Okay. So I'm going to hit Tab, and now you can see it's just back to the gray right out of the box shader here with our fancy color control. What? Oh, that's specular. Sorry. Put that back. Diffuse here. And we could change the color, but we're just limited to color. So we're going to get a map on there. And how you do that, I got this guy selected. Go into here, that little checkerboard, that's your textures. I click on that, and let's go up to the top to where we got some information right here. And I'm going to say new. Now I know I want to put this color map on here. So I've already created one. I'll say open. Oh boy, I may not be able to find it though. No, I'm not going to be able to. Yeah, because it's a funny thing with Blender. Well, maybe I can do that. Yes, okay, I'm going to try this. So I'll say down here there's a thing called external data, and if I check that, I can save. I'll save as number 2. This is great too. If you're doing consecutive models, this one's not numbered, but you hit plus on there, it's going to put a number. And this works for renderings too. So if you're doing consecutive renderings, you don't have to rename it. You just hit this plus button and it'll keep on adding a number to it. So if you're doing, and I do this all the time with renders, where then I could just open it up, boom, hit plus, and it'll save it out again. I don't have to bother with the renaming. But since I'm saving this object out, a lot of students will send me a model that they're working on. They're doing a text, they've got materials and textures on it, and I'll receive the model, but when I open it up, there's no textures. And that's because they didn't go into external data and select automatically pack into .blend. And what that does is it will collect all of the textures and save them with the model as one file. You won't actually see the textures, but you will be able to, when you open up the model, it'll have them all packed in with the file. So I know the textures are in there. I can go into this little up and down arrow thingy and scope it out, and here it is. Okay, so this is just the color data on that jacket. Get another light back here. There we go. Yeah, just so we got it lit around a little bit better. Yeah, so that's, now when you're in perspective mode too, it's very difficult for me to zoom in real carefully. So I can switch back into ortho, and it gives me a lot better control for exactly where I want to narrow into this. Okay, so I want to add the normal map to that too. Just right click on it. We've got the color map on there, but we need to add the normal map. And you can see here, the color map, that's where it's assigned. So you need to actually select that for the color map to be showing up on there. And now if I want to add another one, I'll go down here, and I want to add a normal map. And this, I believe, is the normal map I created for that jacket, yeah. So by default, it loads itself into the color slot. So we go back down here, you'll see, yep, sure enough, it loaded it into the color slot. I don't want it in the color slot, so I'll turn that off. And it defaults back to what the previous one was. So I know I want that as a normal map. And I just want to check this because by default this isn't on. Just got to make sure that's on. And I believe that goes this way. And here's what I was talking about, a seam. And that's because this normal map is inverted. It's like one's for DirectX and one's for OpenGL. This is very easy to fix by inverting the Y channel. But I'm not going to worry about that on this one right now. So I'm going to go back to this guy and kill this specularity because it's driving me crazy. So bring that down. And one way to think of specularity is how shiny something is. Now, this method isn't used as often anymore since they're switching to these physically based materials more. And what you have with physically based is a metal and a roughness. So this would be kind of the roughness channel. When you figure, it's like how light is reflected on a surface. So if a surface was very smooth, you're going to get a reflection of that light, or like a mirror, a very smooth surface, or something that's smooth and it's black, and you can look into that surface and you can see a reflection like this glass here. If this glass was roughed up, if we took sandpaper to it, our reflections in that glass would become more and more blurry. It's the same thing with roughness, with a specular map, and the appearance would be something like this. So as this was roughed up, the light and the reflection of light would become more and more diffuse across the surface. So here this would be a very shiny surface, or a surface that is not rough, and then this would be a rougher surface. But this is the older model using specular and gloss. And here in Blender they call it gloss hardness. So I cranked that up, and then this is similar too to roughness, where, let me crank the intensity of the specular up. So the harder the surface, that kind of makes sense to roughness. So if it is a soft, so you can see how that's spreading out more, that reflected light or simulated reflected light. Whereas if I make the surface harder, it's much more like now it's like a raincoat or something made out of plastic or rubber. I'll pull that down. But for something that would be cloth, the light, it's not very reflective at all unless it's wet. And I'll bring that specularity down. Now for this one I actually do have a spec map, so that where there are spots and stuff, some parts where there's splashes, they're very shiny, and where the cloth is, it's not shiny at all. Let me see if I've got a map in here. I don't think I had that plugged in though, that map. I'll take a look. It might be that. No, it's completely black. So I'll just get rid of that one. And let's see. It doesn't look like I have a specular map. But how a specular map would work is where it's white, it would be very high intensity, let's say. So the white areas would give it this look, black areas would give it this look, and then gray areas would give it somewhere in between. And you can control that. I generally control them with when I'm making a color map, I'll find those areas, they'll be in a layer, like where there are splashes like this area. and some areas like this, which may be more or less specular. So you have that variety of surface with, and also there would be a kind of a zigzaggy cloth look, so that light catches those areas with the cloth. Let's see if I switch over here to the cycles. Yeah, now you can see what I mean by those materials being very different. So since I switched over to cycles, if I hit render now, rendered view, you're not even getting that those materials at all. It's a whole different setup. I could go into here and say use nodes, and this is how you would set up textures for cycles. So let me open this up. Well, this is kind of a big deal too. I should go over this. I wish I went over this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to switch out of cycles because it's kind of making this crawl. Go back to Blender Render, and because I switched it to nodes, now it doesn't understand that texture. I'm just going to undo. Go back to Blender Render. Okay. Shift middle mouse. Yeah, this is something that drove me crazy when I first started using Blender. I noticed these little tabs up here, and so, oh, what is that? And you pull it over, and oh, great, I got another window. That's fantastic. And then I went, okay, I'll pull another one. Oh, I got another window. This is great. So I got all these windows I can control, and I can move them around by sliding this up and down. But how do you get rid of them? You can right-click, and then you go on Google. How do I get rid? It's such an open question. How do I get rid of windows in Blender? You know, but how you do it is really convoluted. They should just add a right click here and say close window or something, but how you do it is you go back over to this, and before you get the hang of it, you're going to end up probably creating a whole bunch more windows. But once you do get the hang of it, you grab onto that. Oh my God. Okay, I'm holding down on it, left mouse click, there. Okay, and you see that arrow? There and over here. I let go of the left mouse. That's how I got rid of one of them. And then I'm going to hold this down. And there. You can see the arrow. I'm still holding the mouse down. Let go of that. Yeah, and this can drive you crazy. So it's just something to be aware of. It's a really useful thing once you get the hang of it. Oh, but what I wanted to show you is here. There's another window down here. If you want to get rid of that, again, you can go. I think it only allows me to do it from the bottom. No. Okay, good. But here's what I wanted to show you. And you can't undo it either. So there we go. It's kind of hard to do one from here. There we go. Okay, so what we have here that we've been working in the whole time is 3D view. That's this modeling view. And 90% of the time, I'll have that open. Down in the bottom here, we have all these other options, okay? There's a graph editor for animation. There's a dope sheet also for animation. There's a node, it's an information editor. I'm not sure what the letters stand for. This is our UVs. Since this guy does have UVs, I can show you one. So grab that by hitting tab. It took me into edit mode. It'll deselect it. A, select it all. And this works the same way as with the other parts. If I hit L on there, it's going to select all the connected parts. Same thing here. Those are buttons. But really what I want is, I would just be, hit A to deselect all, is just this jacket part, so here. And you can see how that's spread out, and that's how a texture can be laid on there and then it's wrapped back around him. So that's the UV. We're not going to get into UVs right now. That's one of the things that when people, just getting a handle on modeling is enough, and it can take you years. But when you want to actually apply textures to something, you can apply a material to something, and it can have properties of color and shininess, metalness, all that stuff. But if you want to have actual physical paint on something, like these details or this paint, you have to unwrap it. You have to have a way of putting a texture, a 2D texture, onto this 3D surface. And the way you do that is through UV mapping. And it's most people's least favorite thing in the world. There's a lot of, Blender's actually got fantastic unwrapping tools. So you can have the fewest number of steps to arrive at an unwrapped piece of geometry. Yeah, so just going through these. There's the UV one, there's this video sequence editor, movie clip editor, a text editor. You know, you can write words in there. A node editor. Okay, now this is really useful. The node editor is for when you're using cycles, and that's how you create materials for cycles. So let's say I'm just going to create a different cube here, and we will switch to cycles. And I'll select this cube, get a material here, say new, and yeah, and it created our node for that cube right there. So I could change the color in here. You can see that'll change. But these nodes are amazing. You could do so much with them. Well, let's say if I were to, I want to add an image map to this cube. You go Shift A, get down in here, Shift A, and you have all these different types of shaders you could add, textures. So I know that's a texture that I might want to add. I would go Image Texture. And then I would load up an image in here, and the color data, I plug into this one, and this is not a very shiny thing. So if I wanted to have this cube have the possibility of being shiny, I have to go Shift A again and look under shaders, and let's see, we got all these different types of bidirectional surface, whatever. Do you know that? Do you remember what that stands for? The SDF shaders. But here, let's put a, if I want something to be shiny, I need to use not a mix shader, translucent, where is that? Glossy. Yeah. So let's say a glossy one here. And I'll unplug this one and plug this one in. Okay, let's switch the color to, we'll make this one blue. And that's good. And we want to make this, if I lower that roughness way down, this is going to be a very shiny surface. So I'll go into this rendered mode. Hopefully it's not in shadow too much. Yeah. So here you can start to see that. And if I spread that roughness out, now it's not quite as shiny. You can see it over here too. So if it's more rough, so it's less, it's the light that's reflected on it is getting spread out more. If I pull this all the way down, it will become a mirror surface. Oh, didn't like that. Okay, well, we're past 9 o'clock. I'll boot up Blender again. Oh, it was running. I'm running 2 versions. So, yeah, it is a really robust program, though. Yes. Yeah, there's some. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is literally no strings attached free.
Yeah, I'd like to show you guys this too. I don't care about those changes. Yeah, within a lighting environment with cycles, I've just been getting into this lately, and it's so cool. I wish I brought a good model though, but I'll just show you in here. So I'm in cycles here. That's the cycles render. And what we have down here, this is, okay, usually you're in this mode, this little square, which is the textures. So if I were, I don't think there's any actual node textures on this one. So I'll select this. Yeah, there is. Okay, so it's using, this is this little ball here, and this is what it's got on it. But if I want to control the environment, the rendering environment within cycles, you could actually light, you need to select this ball here, and you can actually light let me close that up, all your objects in your scene with a texture. There's a type of texture called an Hdri image, which, there's one in here. Not sure there really is one in here. Let me do a render real quick to see if it's actually in there. No, it's not. But what an Hdri image is, I've got one here. Textures, Hdri. This is amazing too with Blender. If you click on this little guy, it'll show you any kind of image possible. Photoshop doesn't even do that. Photoshop won't even show you PSDs. But Blender will actually show you Hdri images if you give it time to render them out, which is incredible. Here, I'll load up one of these. So what's happening is this image right here, this Hdri image, home interior Hdri. What this is an image that was created with multiple exposures. So you take a photo on a tripod of something with a very low exposure, and you gradually increase the exposures. So then all those exposure levels are stored into this floating point image that has all this data about light in it. Real light, not light that generally if you do, if you turn the brightness up on an image, it's just the overall image is just gonna become blown out, right? Or the gamma or any of that. What Hdri images have is, let's say, if you're outside at night, you'll see little orange lights from houses. That might not be a good example. Okay, let's say a bright sunshiny day. You'll see the sun, and if you lower exposures, the sun will still be in the scene. You can turn the exposures down to the lowest possible exposures with the fastest shutter speed, and you'll still see an orange sun, which is what these images are like. You'll have at the lowest level where there's any light, those will be the only things in the image that show up. But as you increase it, it's the light from the image, I'm not describing it well at all, but it's a much more realistic depiction of light done in a 2D image. Okay, so these images, the Hdri images, pack a punch, and you can actually light an entire scene. So if you've got a sun within one of these Hdri images, it will light and cast shadows on objects within your scene from a picture, from an image. So there's one in here right now. I'll switch over to this cycles render. Okay, the cycles renderer. What did I do with my little doohickey? Oh, okay. See a little plus sign that disappeared on me. Here we go. So let's go to rendered and see what we got. Okay, so this texture is not working, I know that, but this is lighting our scene. So what I want to do, I don't need these here. I'm going to crank up the strength of the HDRI. And here is how I can rotate that image. Now what's moving is the background image. Let me get a shader on this though because it looks silly. So I got to switch over to Object, and I can select that. I guess it's a cube. I think it's this guy right here that's not working. So let's get rid of that. And I'll just, you go Shift A to get your nodes. Let's put a, I guess I'll put a glossy in there. And there, this is, plug that into here. Okay. And since it's not real rough, it's got almost a reflection on it. I bring that down even more. See, it'll begin to reflect this scene. So I'm going to switch back over to this set of nodes. It's not even using these right here right now. So I'll get rid of those just so they're not in the way. And we can rotate this a bit more. Now this scene is pretty diffuse. So we're not having a big, oh, there's a light right there. Okay. Just gonna switch back over to here and bring this up a bit more. Yeah, we got pretty diffuse shadows though. Because in a room like this, as it would be, there's light bouncing off all those walls. So the reason we don't have a real sharp shadow here is because the light coming in through here is hitting the couch, it's hitting the walls, and that's what's taken up in this image. Oops, wrong one. Switch back over to here, crank this up a bit more. Yeah. Yeah, you're still only seeing a little shadow from it. So I'm going to open up a different one. Let's close that. And let's find a different HDRI image. One maybe from outdoors. Why didn't they show up? Oh, okay. It's in my textures. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. One with direct sunlight. So something like this. I'll load that up. And it's blown out quite a bit. Lower that down. Okay, it's getting a little better. Now you're seeing that shadow. Remember, there's no other lights in this scene at all. It's just being lit by this image. Let's see where that sun is. Yeah, let me see if I can explain it better. So here I got the scale, right? I'm gonna make it. I'll make it a lot bigger. So I'll make it 10 by 10 by 10. Okay, I forgot one. There we go. 10. So what I want you to picture is a sphere. What Blender creates is a sphere, right? And it takes that image. And generally these images are taken, like somebody will get, you know those weird mirror balls that people sometimes put on their lawns? Yeah. Well, you take a picture of one of those things at these different exposure levels. And then from that image, you stretch it out in Photoshop, and it's like a 32-bit image. It has all these levels of those exposures in it. And then you get it so that it can wrap around something. And that's what they do, they wrap it around a sphere. That's what this shader is doing. So, yeah, if I go into this shader, Oh, wrong one. So in the world shaders, that's that guy. Yeah, this is the right one. But it's just showing me, it's not showing me the other material. Object vector point. Oh, background. This one right here. So this node is the one that tells it to wrap around a ball. And then this is just the output here, world output. It's different for this thing though. So like for this object, when we look at that node network for it that I made, we got material output and then this glossy one that we put in there. Diffuse is just, I can't make that, like say I bring that all the way down to nothing and I've got a reflection of that mirror ball, right? And there we go. Whereas if I were to plug this one in there, this diffuse one, and roughness is already down to 0, you're not getting any reflections. And you're not going to, you know, because this is a different type of description of a surface. And you could bring these two together too. So like say, well, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You can go Shift A and get something called a mix shader right here. And I'll plug that in there and then plug this one in there. And right now they're 50-50, right? Let's see, what would it be if I mix yellow? It's kind of a yellowy green, but yellow and red, you get an orange. And you can see the result as mixing them. Let me just fix that. Okay. And that roughness, I'll bring that up a little bit. So it just gives you more control over this. Now it's starting to become a more complex surface. You'll notice, so there's like a lot of noise in this image. You can go and control that. So let's say I hit a render, F12. And it'll start to render it out. There's less noise in the render, but the reason for that is the number of samples that I've got going. This is another cool thing about Blender that no other programs let you do. While it's rendering, I can go and start messing around with other stuff. So let's say here in the renderer camera, right? Go into the camera and it'll tell me samples that I'm rendering at. In that preview that was really noisy, that's 100. And this one, which is still noisy, it's 128. So I'm going to change that to 512. And I'm going to hit escape on this. Let's see, 512. So now it's doing 512 samples. If I hit render again, it's going to take a lot longer, but all those little noise, fireflies, whatever you want to call them, will begin to disappear. So you can get a smoother image. There's other ways to do it. For one thing, like one of those HDRI images, since it's wrapping around a scene and causing all that light, it's a lot of light pollution in it. Whereas if I just took a regular light, like in this case, I'm just going to stop that. So let's say I take that HDRI and I turn it down to practically nothing. I'll make it 0.5. Okay, so now it's just like an ambient light. And I go and add a light, a regular light. So where are they? Get that thing out of there. So I'll just put a point light in here. And let me zoom in. Yeah, it's real. Now you can see that shadow is really pretty crisp. because this light is close to it. But here I can show you something quick. With the light, I'll make that an area light. And where is this thing? Let me turn this off so you can see the light is right here. It's pointing straight down. And I want to bring it up even more. Like that. Shift, middle mouse. And I'm going to make this really big. Okay. So that's a big lighting surface, right? It's set up pretty high. So now when we go into that cycles render, you can see the shadows really diffuse because it's got this large area of light that's hitting it. So it's almost like you got a ball here and there's light coming from this direction, from the left, from the top, and from the almost surrounding this whole ball. Whereas if I go and tell that light source to, you wouldn't believe how nice it is now that you can see these. So I'm going to tell that light source it's much smaller surface. It's coming from just this little small surface. And now that shadow will be sharp. See? But since it is a smaller one, I got to turn up the power of it. Not that much. Oh, that's the HDRI. I'll turn that all the way up. Yeah, I could turn this one up now. And what's really cool too is I'm going to render this with the F12. Is as the light hits, it's calculating the light hitting that surface that the ball's sitting on top of, and it's bouncing back at the ball. So let's see what now this is still at 512, but you won't see hardly any of those little noisy fireflies either now, because it's not as complex as seeing that's lighting that ball. You can do a thing too with when you're rendering. Where you just define a little area. So you can define just a square, and it'll render just that square out, which is a lot quicker. Yeah, but see how smooth that is compared to when we were just doing the HDRI? This is a weird texture. I'm not really crazy about that. It's like something otherworldly because I'm mixing those two. Yeah, but see how it's also, the light's hitting it, bouncing off this white, hitting the yellow, and then the yellow photons, or pretend photons, are bouncing back, and you're getting some of that yellow on the surface of the plane too. Now, see how there's that square? That's an artifact from this not being a very round sphere. I'd have to tessellate that a bit to get that. See that little, how those squares are? It's because this geometry. This is really low poly. So I switch to back to material and hit tab. See, it's really low. I'm just going to tessellate it. So I'll throw one of these sub-Ds on it. Oh. Okay. I'll just hit F12 real quick to render this one. And you'll see that that's fixed. That weird shadow artifact. But these are like with these node systems, I've got to look them up almost every time I want to create a new one. But because, like where to plug in a normal map, how to plug in a metal map and a roughness map, and to get them to work properly. But with the new Blender, they've got, I don't know what they call it, like the Uber shader, and it has all of them in it. So it's just a much better model for shading. Yeah, and here you can see nice and smooth. And this renderer is fantastic, but the new one that they're coming out with is comparable to V-Ray or Arnold or, yeah. And the real-time action, I mean, this is already comparable to V-Ray, the Cycles one. And it's all free. All right, well, thank you guys. I'm definitely running out of air here.
Are there any, so the Lord is readers watching, are there any questions that you would like to,
Yeah, and you could send them to, now if you go to that screamingmonkey.net/B for Blender, so Blender, I've got my email address on there and you could email me directly. It's right at the bottom. You can just click on it and send me an email. Yeah, right here. So if you click on that, remember all of these are links too. So you could, you know.
You just click outside that.
Okay. Somewhat?
in the meantime, yes, since you're putting, or,
Do you want to set the screen first?
no, we're asking for questions, right?
Yeah.
Jeff, if you don't mind me, in case they didn't hear me, if you don't mind repeating that, if anyone has any questions, that would be great.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please send them in to on the Twitch, or right down here you can, this is my email address if you click on it, and you can send them directly to me. I'd be glad to answer anybody's questions.